How are we doing, coin traders? Thanks for joining me for the show. We are looking at HBAR Hedera hash graph, HBAR, HBAR on that ticker. Big pump for the bulls here on the daily chart. Big retracement over the course of a week. And now we're looking at the bulls finding support and seeing a little bit more rally to the upside. So lots to talk about here in the short term and longer term charts here. So if you are new to the channel, huge welcome and welcome back to everyone returning. Don't forget to hit the subscribe and like if you have not done so just yet to stay updated on all types of crypto content like this, specifically with HBAR. So now if we do actually start by zooming out, and I want to look at the overall percentage gain here from the fall when a lot of altcoins started actually rallying. So the middle of October is when we saw it. So up to the current trend high right now, 300%. Realistically, where we got to before a lot of crypto started pulling back here at the beginning of March, only about 200% gain, so about 3x returns from there. From current prices, looking at about 135%, so still decent, down to the low of the pullback, about 50%. So still very nice trends. So we have the low high, pulled back, higher high, and then now higher low on this bounce as well, making a new higher high. So obviously this type of setup's not necessarily that normal and typically not what we expect, especially when we have bullish candles that do look like this. So we actually had a gain for the candle of about 72%, maintaining that close. And what's actually significant about this, we look at the top, didn't actually see much of a sell-off, but obviously on the following candle, big upside wick, and then huge sell-off after that. So we were looking at the upside wick being a pullback of about 13-14%, and then obviously the body of the candle that day down to 20% and down to 25% at the low point. So if we look at the candles here, we're looking at seven candles that it did take to actually pull back within the amount of the body of this HBAR. And actually, we didn't even get to the bottom of the body. So overall, still very strong for the bulls. And then obviously can't completely look at this bearish candle since we did have a huge upside wick. So a lot of that was actually coming in as a bullish volume here. And especially after that tapering off bearish volume, very good sign on this pullback. So especially now finding the support level for the low on price, 8.97 cents there. Now, on the current daily candles that we've been looking at coming off of this low for support, not necessarily that much volume coming in, but not necessarily that much volume that came in for the rest of this rally at all. So still pretty much a decent amount overall. But especially right now as we do get to the heart line of this overall chop longer term sideways period before the pullback and the huge pump. So we're probably going to get stuck up here in this zone, pretty much right around the 11 to 12 cent mark. And if we actually want to go ahead and turn on VPVR, volume profile visible range, yeah, you can just see how this is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about the heart line here, just how important and relevant this is. So looking over on the VPVR, big point of mass. So a lot of volume for trading in this overall area. So likely I would expect, especially since we pulled back, minimal volume and didn't even really see that much support. So going to flip it into resistance in that instance. What we would have liked to have obviously see is a little bit more stabilization and support in this overall level and zone. Didn't find that, so that's okay. But that does mean on the way up, we're probably going to see a little bit more struggle. Ideally, I would expect, especially with this type of minimal bullish volume coming in. So biggest point of mass here we're looking at coming in is going to be right around 11.61 cents down to about 11.24 cents. So a very strong zone. However, the benefit to that, though, is that when we actually do break above that, we see these huge moves like we saw, especially when we do have volume to back it up. But realistically, I would love and prefer to see stabilization along this price. Maybe not necessarily as long as we saw in this instance, and then obviously rather than a pullback, we would get a little bit more bullish upside to favor the bulls here. So that's kind of the best case scenario right now, especially after pulling back, setting this higher low. So that's a very good sign as well. And ultimately, we do need to see a break and pretty much a close on top of the 12 cent level. That would be one of the best price performance options for Hedera hash graph right now. And then hopefully in that instance, that would allow a little bit of a zone for the price to actually run up and test this previous trend resistance coming in at about 13.5 cents, all the way up to the price of resistance at about 14 cents. So a pretty big zone there as well. And then from there, we actually would be off to the races as well, looking for the next trend high. Now, I want to flip over right now into the weekly chart for HBAR and specifically talk about the different points of resistance and support that we were looking at based on the initial move and the current all-time high right now back at the end of the 2021 rally. So we do got two price lines drawn up right now. We do have one at about 14.6 cents and then the other one at 17.15 cents. So looking left, those were big points of resistance as well as support. And then we could even be really ambitious and then look up to about 19.8 cents as well, or effectively the 20-cent psychological mark. And so these are really going to be our upside targets and resistances once we actually blow past this 12 to 13 to 14 cent level. And so especially with a favorable chart setup that we'll talk about here in a second for the weekly, we know that upside direction is going to be start to favor the bulls a lot more than the bears, especially if we can continue a lot of the bullish things that we're looking at on the weekly chart. So specifically, when we talk about great signs on this weekly chart right now, do want to talk about how after finding a low, we actually did find higher lows on each of these pullbacks specifically. So stair stepping, found our low, higher low again, and then now finally broke up to higher trend highs, pulled back, set a higher low, higher high, pulled back, higher low as well. So a lot of great signs in the short term right now for this weekly chart. Obviously, this huge upper wick on this weekly candle that closed isn't necessarily the best, but we also still have a pretty decent sized bullish candle here, especially after kicking off of the 50-period EMA and then having a nice close on top of the 12-period EMA for the weekly. So current weekly candle do have a little bit less than 3 days until we close it, and had a very nice price level bounce off the 26-period EMA. So that's extremely solid as well. And then obviously defending on top of the 12-period EMA. So hopefully getting a lot more of that support. Not likely right now that we're going to top out this volume. Huge amount of volume coming in for HBAR, 397.2 million for the volume. So definitely a ton, but overall still a very nice longer term uptrend, especially after getting rejected from the 50-period EMA, breaking above it, and then finally retracing, confirming it and backtesting this as support, along with these very nice bullish crosses on all these exponential moving averages. So if we zoom out, you can just see how far apart they were. And then we always love to see when these exponential moving averages just start to get tight, really tight together, and then finally have this very nice cross. And then obviously the bullish thing for it is when we actually do get above, pullback, backtest, and then really after we get the pullback and backtest, this is when we start seeing a little bit more momentum kick off after we do prove and confirm that for the longer term, we're seeing that bullish sentiment and we are changing the trend for the longer term. And that's really when we do start to see cycles start to actually take off. So from here, still expecting a lot more gains. And typically these type of chart setups do get a lot more parabolic. And then you know what we talk about when we do talk about parabolic moves is that once they actually do get parabolic, consolidate for a little bit, and then that sets up for the next parabolic leg as well. Now on this weekly chart, I actually want to turn off the 12 and 26 period exponential moving averages just because all that we have up on the screen right now is the 50 period EMA. So even starting back to the beginning around the end of 2020, around the mid to end of 2020, before we really kicked off it in December of 2020 for this big move here that actually saw prices getting pushed up until about March for this trend high before pulling back. And the interesting thing too about HBAR Hedera hash graph is that if we actually look at the amount of time it sat sideways kind of around this trend high, we're looking at about 11 weeks. And so even looking at the current all-time high, looking at 11 weeks as well for these moves. So we actually have a period of these bars actually sitting for about 11 weeks, more or less sideways kind of in this chop. So even running up, had 11 weeks here, more or less chop when we talk about the overall price levels. And it's very interesting because instead of having kind of like what we see very frequently when we have a lot of these huge spike moves where we just get huge spikes and then huge retracements, to sit sideways actually for 11 weeks kind of indicates a lot of indecision and like a lot of hype and euphoria comes in all at once. And then there's a lot of tension about what we'll actually see after that. So if we actually look at a lot of these candles too, a lot of long lower downside shadows as well as a lot of upper wicks. So a lot of indecision once the price actually gets to this level. But the good news is that it doesn't just rally and then completely retrace and give it all back. But obviously we see high volatility when we do have these huge price spikes. So we are expecting something kind of similar in this instance as well. But obviously we haven't even started this type of movement for the bull cycle just yet. But we are set up very nice for a lot of longer term upside gains here. All right, so want to look at some technical indicators right now, specifically RSI, Relative Strength Index, and Stochastic RSI. So looking at Stochastic RSI first, got a very nice bullish cross below the 20 line, so a very good sign as well. If we actually look at these oscillars, they're pretty evenly spaced out, and the thing about it is that if we actually look at the cross bullish cross followed by bullish upside, bullish cross here followed by bullish upside. So historically what we have seen the last several attempts, and even here too, nice bullish cross and a little bit bullish upside, is that every single time we do get this bullish cross, and specifically the last 2 times we've been about the 20 line or even slightly above it, that has led to these nice upside gains. And then even in this instance, so for example, the most recent one that we were looking at some upside of about 100% gain. So obviously not to say we're going to get that again, but typically what we find is that they do start to repeat, especially when we have very nice spaced out oscillators that have been performing well. And we have plenty of other signs that let us know that this is probably a likely scenario, just like pulling back, finding support on EMAs, pulling back, finding support on EMAs. So realistically, we're set up in a very nice trend spot to be able to see these EMAs actually roll up back to the 80 line or higher, especially now that we have gotten our bullish cross. Now, conversely, what we also see is kind of the same thing, but the opposite is when they do get to the top and we do get that bearish cross, and we do see those pullbacks and retracements down to the EMAs on this weekly. So I think right now, especially after finding this kind of longer term flush, and so we talked about it being over 50%, then we do have a much greater chance of it actually rallying up and seeing some upside potential, especially since this weekly candle, even though we do have this enormous upside wick, is still very much a good sign, putting in that new price high and likely to experience a lot more bullish upside pressure, especially because path of least resistance right now, based on this very nice bullish setup, is still path of least resistance to the upside here. Switching over to short term right now, looking at 1 hour. I don't mean it's super short, but anyway, so if we actually look at a very big price level, looking just shy of the 11-cent mark. So big point that we did get rejected at, we're getting rejected at looking left, big point of resistance, looking left, support, and then support as well. So if we can actually get back above this 11-cent level, very good shot that we can maintain it as very nice support, which is exactly what we want to see when we talk about these short-term movements, especially after finding some closing support coming in right around 9.175 here. Like we mentioned, though, we do have the heart line of this overall big long-term sideways chop period that started about the middle of February through about the start to middle of April. So a very big period of about 2 months here that realistically we're probably going to experience sort of the same type of thing if we do see a little bit more bullish upside. So that's one of the reasons why being able to break and hold a close on top of the 11-cent mark would actually be pretty beneficial, because likely we would experience a little bit more trading, kind of like what we experienced in this instance, where on top of the pattern, we found this level as support multiple times before finally rallying up to a new trend high in that instance. Now, given the rest of crypto as well, that's not necessarily a guarantee that right now we're just going to see a complete break, because as long as we do keep and maintain 11 cent as that period of that point of resistance, we are likely going to experience a little bit more sideways chop and rejection from this level, which could potentially see us seeing prices down to the bottom side below the 10-cent level down to about the 9-cent mark, where we'd be looking at price level supports about 9.2 down to 9.1 cents. So best case scenario right now for the bulls in the shorter term is to see an influx of nice bullish volume and to be able to break this 11-cent point of resistance and then be able to flip it actually with some nice period of sideways consolidation and confirming that as that nice period of support before seeing a next rally. Because really we would love to see a stronger trend and setup compared to just an explosive move with a ton of volume and then obviously a huge sell-off and dump like we see so often out of crypto. Overall, though, we are seeing great things out of HBAR, and we know that it is one of the strong names sitting pretty high up in the CoinMarketCap rankings, so I do expect a lot of great things out of it this cycle, and we do have a lot of potential coming in here. So hopefully this clarifies things to be looking out for in the coming days and weeks, and if you do have any questions, comments, issues, predictions, disagreements, all that type of stuff, let me know down in the comments sections below, or feel free to reach out to me over on Twitter or X at @coin_trades is the handle over there. That is going to do it for now, though, so make sure to go ahead and hit the like and subscribe if you have not done so just yet, if you do want to stay updated on all types of altcoin and crypto content like this. And so do appreciate all the continued love and support. It does mean so much. That is it for now, though, so stay safe, coin traders. Take care, and I'll catch you back in the next video.